There is perhaps no weapon in history more iconic than the knight's sword, and swords are some of the best and most versatile weapons in Chivalry 2. I'm Strider the Champ, and in today's video, I'll be ranking the swords of Chivalry in order from worst to best. If you enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe. The thing with swords and chivalry is that they're all pretty decent. However, I think it's fair to say at the bottom spot, we can place the short sword. The short sword, for all intents and purposes, it's just a worse version of the regular arming sword, doing less damage and having less reach, with no difference in weapon speed between the two. There's no real reason to ever run the short sword as a primary weapon, I guess unless you play the ambusher class. Now in the 7th spot, we have a weapon that has made Redditors and bad players cry since conception, and that is the Highland Sword. Now, I was never a huge fan of the Highland Boys. Even at its peak, the Highland Sword to me, it was just a shitter stomper, good for destroying mobs of bad players. The Highland Sword always excelled because of its range and heavy hitting attacks. You could swing through a massive fight and just regularly down 3 to 4 enemies in a single slash. However, the Highland Sword is very slow, clunky to fight with, and it doesn't obey the rules of initiative against many weapons. Now, after receiving nerfs to its speed, making it even clunkier, and the damage is now less, also making it less effective at stomping shitters, I see no reason to run this over a Greatsword. In the 6th spot, we have a weapon that has really grown on me, and that is the Rapier. The Rapier is super fast and fluid to fight with, and those heavy stabs pack a bit of a punch. I find this weapon, combined with good movement, is really effective at moving just slightly outside your opponent's block radius and stabbing them to death. One of the things that makes the Rapier so good is people struggle to fight against it due to both the weapon's speed and the fact that the animations can be kind of hard for players to read. In the 5th spot, we have the One-Handed Sword, which is just super fluid to fight with. The One-Handed Sword has many similar qualities to the Rapier, being fast and hard to read. However, the One-Handed Sword has a much more balanced damage profile, allowing you to vary overhead stabs and the occasional slash. This versatility, along with not hit stopping, will make this an easier weapon to use for most than, say, the Rapier. At 4, we have what I like to call the mini messer, and that's the Falcion. This thing, it's just great in team objective because it does a bit more damage than the other one-handed sword weapons while only being a tad slower, and these slightly slower attacks in some ways are not a bad thing because you can perform some decent drags and swing manipulation with the Falcion. The Falcion is also one of the better one-handed 1vx weapons, and it's extremely strong in Chivalry 2 team objective. Now as we get to the top 3, we'll be bringing out some of the heavy hitters in Chivalry 2, starting with the Greatsword. Greatsword is one of my most used weapons in the game, and it just feels really good to use. It hits hard, has a really nice reach or range, and unlike your Highland boys, it can maintain the rules of initiative against most weapons, making it feel really fluid and fun to fight with. The Greatsword is also extremely draggable, and those long drags allow you to bypass the counters of even some of the strongest players. Easily one of my favorite and strongest pub smashing weapons in the game. Those heavy overheads are just so satisfying. At the top spot, we have the Messer, and one could argue it should be number 1. There's some personal preference to these things, and Messer has always been top tier in Chivalry because of versatility. It packs some damage, has decent reach, and it's faster than the Greatsword. And, to top it off, its animations can be really difficult to read. The Messer excels in both 1v1 and 1vx fights, which again is a testament to its versatility. With the Messer, I always say it might not be the best weapon at any one thing, but it's good at everything, so just being able to mix all of your attacks in with drags and excels makes it so good. And at the top spot, we have my Bay, the longsword. Stabbing is always the strongest attack in games like this because it doesn't get caught on those pesky teammates, and longsword is highly effective when played around those stabs and overheads. The longsword is fast with decent reach, and you really have to be careful about those countered excel attacks when fighting longsword, but it can also be slowed down with some decent drags. Longsword also, it can be difficult to read as top players can disguise the animations to make it really tricky to decide if you have a slash or an overhead coming at you. Longsword has always been my comfort pick weapon, and I think anyone who makes the switch, once you get used to not slashing as much, will love just how fluid this weapon feels to fight with. Alright guys, that's it for me in the rankings of the swords of Chivalry. Let me know down below, should I do another video ranking some weapons? If so, what ones? Champ out.